welcome to the Vision 2020 Live on Purpose series. I'm super excited about this one, and I know many of you have been joining us. And for those of you that have been watching it on the replay, you've been introduced to some pretty amazing folks, some pretty amazing people that have overcome some pretty amazing tragedies in some cases. And I keep saying amazing because I want people to understand that we are amazing. For me, because we're made in God's image, and that makes us even more amazing. But I also want people to understand that they've got something inside of them, something innate that allows them to do the impossible when we think it's impossible. So this couple today, I'm super excited about. Oh my gosh, Joe and Sandra, I don't want to give away your story. There's so much here to be said, but for those who are joining, if you don't know their story, you're going to hear their story. And we're really going to tackle, and what I love about this is we're going to really tackle something that's so important today. And that is, how do you invest in yourself when the whole world is falling apart? I think we all know people who are struggling with fear. They've got uncertainty. They've got anxiety. And that's apparent even when there isn't a pandemic. And now we're right in the middle of a pandemic, and there's, people are like, what the heck? And so I asked Joe and Sandra if they would kind of share their story, because in the middle of chaos, these two found a way to invest in themselves. And that is so important. So I just want to give you a little bit of bio on these two. Joe, without sharing all his story, I'm just going to give you the real high cliff notes. Joe served in the United States Army because he could not get into the Navy, but he a Apache pilot. For those of you who know, I'm a Navy guy, but he became an Apache pilot, which is part of the world's elite. And he did 4 combat tours in that, and served 17 years. And I won't give away why he did not make it to 20. I'm sure he'll share that. And Sandra, Joe and Sandra are connected. And I'm going to let them share their story. And Sandra is a mom. She's an overcomer, battled health issues. So, and yet they still found a way to get through all of it. So to you both, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, it's definitely great to be here. Glad to share the story, and glad to really come out and show that there is a way. I mean, investing in yourself is one of the biggest things that we can do to overcome.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to put it out to everybody that's joining right now. So those of you who are part of this this live webinar, I want you guys to feel free to ask questions. And so what I want to really do for those of you who have joined now is I want you to think about, how are you living on purpose during this time? I mean, really think about that question. How are you living on purpose during this time? Think about that. Send us back some comments on that. Feel free to ask questions as we go through this. So, okay, so Joe and Sandra, let's get into this, because this is going to be a pretty powerful story. What I love about your story, and when I met you, Joe, when I first met you, your name is in the headlines. You're, this Apache pilot guy, right? 4 combat tours, pretty amazing. You go to UW, which is even better, family history there, right? And we met, and, we talked about what it meant to live on purpose, right? And then I met Sandra. And, for the audience, I'll just be straight up. When Sandra and I met, I was like, Joe, should I say yes to Sandra? Should I bring her into the network? And Joe was so kind. He said, absolutely, 100%. So Joe and Sandra met when they were in junior high school. And then went to high school together. And why don't you guys kind of carry it on from there? So Sandra, why don't you let the audience know a little bit about you, and then Joe, we'll pull you into that story.
Absolutely. So we went to high school together, and then, spent quite a few years living life on our own, different directions, different paths. I had a daughter. She's absolutely beautiful. She's a teenager now. But kind of my connecting story with this and how everything comes together is when she was born, she was pretty significantly injured at birth. Her head was fractured in 2 places with forceps. So there was a whole host of medical complications as a result of that, from a brain tumor, seizures, so many different things. And during this period of time, I really spent like dedicated to my daughter. I was, you know, going to school, trying to graduate, working, being a single mom during that time. And I was very blessed to have an amazing family that helped me through all of this. But it was definitely very different, very difficult to say the least, to have gone through this situation over almost 8 years is what it took before. To be honest with you, the only way that any doctor or any person could ever equate it to is that she was miraculously healed by God. So about 8 years in, spending all that time in the hospitals and just really, you know, basically kind of fighting for survival for many years, she finally came out on top. And probably a couple of years later, I'd say around that time, Joe and I met up again, and we got married, and it was beautiful. It was great. You know, we were coming together in a different way of life, and, you know, really hoping to kind of start this new chapter in a great way. And then some really hard stuff started to unfold that ironically would bring past stuff for both of us together into this period of time we were together in a way that it still even blows our minds, even though we lived through it, to be here today, you know, where we're at. And so,
but I don't want you to give that away yet. And I think it's important to understand that you know, your last name, Wankelman, right? Now, Sandra, your maiden name was Wankel.
Yeah.
Correct? Wankel.
And my middle name is Joe.
Right. So I need the audience to understand that, you know, I'm still a little uncertain. You know, I asked, you know, probably inappropriate questions that I'm not going to ask on this webinar, but what I love about your story so far, Sandra, is you battled, right? I mean, you battled, and many people are in a battle right now, right? I mean, there's so many things coming at them, whether it's emotionally or financially or physically, or, you know, in the family life, right? And family can be tough. Like, we all joke that, you know, there's either going to be a lot of quarantine babies or there's going to be a lot of divorces that come out of this thing, because people are having to really deal with issues. And when we get two people together, when we bring two people together, typically what happens is we forget about developing that co-vision, right? Finding a vision together that we can execute on. But we typically bring our baggage together, right? And that's kind of what you were bringing up. And so, Joe, I want you to enter in and say, okay, so you and Sandra, you got reunited, and it felt so good. And then what happened?
Well, you know, I would like to take one step back to kind of understand my story. You have to understand a whole bunch of things. You know, first is that I always had this question. I could never find the words to it, but it was always lingering in the back. It's one of those feelings. It's like an emotion. And it wasn't until really Sandra and I got back together that I started to find the words for it. And it's, why isn't my brain working? I mean, and that's a hard question to really ask yourself. But to be honest, you know, I avoided that question for years.
Wait. So you asked yourself, why isn't my brain working?
Yeah. You know, with everything that I went through, it came from a time and place where, you know, I struggled in school. I struggled to get good grades. I struggled to be accepted. I struggled to fit into communities. I joined the military because I didn't think I was good enough to do anything else. And it was kind of that retreat into a tribe where I wanted to belong. I mean, I had this as a child, as in high school, I had this desire to just belong. I wanted to be part of the in-group, you know, and I know a lot of people who do. In the military, it was the same thing. And that desire always pushed me to achieve, to be excel, because I wanted my accomplishments to be how I earned acceptance, not me. Because again, I couldn't accept myself. I had so much going on, and in this time, I'm not understanding what's going on with me, and so I'm trying to get.
I'm going to interrupt real quick, because
sorry.
you said something pretty important. Is that you wanted your accomplishments, right, to be recognized, right? That's really, and I think we gravitate to that when we don't know who we are.
Exactly.
Right. We say, hey, I am only worth what I do.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why the Apache was, I mean, that accomplishment gave me bravado. It gave me
Yeah.
substance. It gave me something that everybody wanted to go to. I would get to go to air shows and things like that. And just after Sandra, I think it was 6 days after Sandra and I got married, I had dual kidney failure. Got back from my 4th tour, and for some reason, my body just rejected civilian life. And that threw me into such a depressive state. I mean, things were already showing. I have PTSD, depression, anxiety. Things were already exposing, but the dual kidney failure is when things just ramped up because I got my pink slip. And from there, I went through an extreme struggle of my brain. I couldn't figure it out. I'm listening to doctors. Doctors are saying these things are giving me prescription pills. But at the same time, those weren't working the way I needed to. I'd be numb, but I wouldn't heal. And it was, we're about a year into our marriage, and I attempted suicide. It was a hard night. Everything was just crashing down around me. I had lost my tribe. I lost my identity. I lost what I hid behind as being me. And so I'm in this void of who am I? And it just, everything collapsed. And so from there is really where the rebuilding, after that moment, it was either I have to get busy living or I have to get busy dying. I have to find my purpose.
So Sandra, so you guys get married and Joe attempts suicide.
Mm.
What was that like?
Oh, really hard.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think it is not something that can really be understood unless you experience it. But even having experienced it, it's like, it's still hard to understand and fully comprehend. During that time, it was really difficult. And we had decided right after that to jump off the cliff hand in hand and say, we're going to land somewhere and start, figure this out for both of us. But we were even trying before that, but we were just lost in this sea of chaos and so many things going on. And when everything led up to that pivotal changing point, that really hard time, it really became the catalyst to what we already knew and were trying to achieve, but really started propelling it that much forward because this is serious, Yeah. It was really difficult, obviously, seeing, Joe, my husband at the time, go through it. I mean, you feel helpless. You're trying to do so much, and there's just so much like fight or flight going on. It's really hard to be like in a place and time where you can kind of ground yourself, figure out, okay, these are the next steps. What do we do? Seeing him struggle, our whole family. I mean, it really is one of the absolute worst things you can go through that he could have experienced, that we could have experienced, because the idea is that we could have lost him.
Yeah.
Our family would have been forever broken because of that, right? And the extended family, friends, everybody. Yeah. And it really just, it really was that changing point for us. And sorry, I'm kind of at a loss for words, but it really became that moment where we're like, we're either going to do this or we're not. We're either going to invest in ourselves fully, not like we weren't trying to, but we were at a deficit, right? We couldn't really figure out where to go, where to start, how to do it, being inundated with information, and then the craziness of him getting out of the Army. All of these different components, and mine too, that I didn't realize, my anxiety was revving up from stuff I didn't realize, especially with what happened with my daughter. So it's kind of all crashing down at once. Yeah. But it really took that crash where I don't ever believe that you're fully broken. I believe that if you have breath in your lungs the next day, you're never fully broken. We may be fractured, but we're not broken. So we decided, okay, we've got to start somewhere. And investing in ourselves and moving forward, we just knew that we had to do it.
So I there's so much here, guys, right? And I think it's important that everybody knows that I am not a therapist by any stretch. As a matter of fact, I think, therapists probably run from me and I run from them, okay. And I have a great one, by the way. But you're bringing up things like, struggling with shame and guilt, right? I mean, Joe, and you and I have talked about this before. The one thing, the reason why oftentimes our brothers and sisters say, hey, I got to exit, is because they lose. If you guys can hear that in the background, by the way, that is the blower. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Welcome to Yard Work. But there is this shame and guilt and this sense of no more tribe. Joe, you said that. right? There's this loss, and suddenly it's like, if I've got nothing to hope for, and I've riddled with shame and guilt, then there's only one solution. And Sandra, you brought up how that impacted the family. You guys fell to the bottom, and yet instead of staying on the bottom, instead of staying there, you guys chose to rise up. So tell us that story about how you how did you do that? Because people say, yeah, you can say, rise up from the ashes, but how the heck do you do that when you're just overwhelmed by everything?
So, there's a couple things. First thing is you have to decide, are you going to continue this way of life, or are you going to change? I mean, that is one of the hardest decisions. I remember laying in a hospital bed after everything happened, and just sitting is like, I can't do this anymore. What is wrong? What is going on with my brain? Why am I not functioning? And that was a question I had to contemplate, and I had to be honest with myself, because I owned it. I had a ton of guilt from my past. I'm struggling with that. But at this point, it's like, okay, what am I going to do today? I can't think, 4 years down. I know where I want to go, but what am I going to do today to get there? And it's a process. I'll tell you what, I fell on my face more than I would like to admit. I tried things and crashed. The first real big pivot in this whole thing was a month and a half after attempting to end everything. I started college, which is, like I said, I wasn't the smartest kid in high school. I was always told I wasn't good enough to be in college. And at least that's the mental picture I had of myself. And so I faced one of my biggest fears. From that, it's looking at all options. Luckily, I was blessed to have a book come in my life that actually put into context what my question was. Why isn't my brain working? I read that book, and I really started learning about a holistic approach to health, getting the right nutrition in my body, making sure I'm getting enough oxygen, and really making sure that I'm stimulating my mind in ways for healing, ways for learning, and ways for really becoming familiar and speaking the language of transition and resiliency. So that's where it started with. Sandra and I were still, we had our differences, and we were trying to grow and learn. We basically both went on an individual journey to learn about ourselves at this point, because the struggles that we had really started to cause us to, at times, to have to take a pause. And that growth individually, because we were both committed to it, really started leading to change in the way we communicated, started leading into to change in the way that we were able to approach problems and really see how we can come together to help other people. And that's why we're really here, is because we have this common understanding, because I can see into Sandra. I can see her struggles. I've been there. I can feel them. I have empathy for those struggles that she went through, and she has the same for me. And now it's, when we look around in the population, especially in the COVID times, we see people going through the same thing. And we see people, falling the same ways we fell. And that common purpose, as we like to, that purpose-driven mission, was to help other people. Because this is the time that we need to band together. We need to come together as a tribe and really promote health, promote that oxygen, stimulation, nutrition type mentality, so people can get through this situation the best as possible, because crisis takes a toll. The crisis, the struggles I went through, took a toll.
And I love that you guys made the decision to figure it out, right? And we talk about, I have this thing called walk the dog, right? Even if you don't have a dog, go walk the dog, right? And that is just, go outside, get fresh air, walk a mile or two or whatever, and kind of wrestle with your thoughts, but make sure that they're good thoughts, because our thoughts obviously influence our actions, right? Our thinking influences what we say and do, and big believer in that. And Sandra, so you guys parted, and this is the interesting part of the story. You guys got divorced. But look, here you are, you guys are friends. And that's what I want people to see, is even when there's trial and conflict and things don't work out like we think it's going to work out, which is so important for people to pay attention to right now, because things are not going to work out like people thought they would this year. right? Before this happened, people thought, man, I've got things set. I know what my vision is. I know where I'm going. I know what my job is. I know what, you name it, A, B, C, all this is lined up. Every day I wake up, it's a routine. Routines have been shattered. Investments have been crushed, right? Some people are doing great. Other people are struggling. I mean, I love that quote that says, we're all in the same storm. We're just in different boats. Right? Everybody's got a different experience here. And so, Sandra, you navigated that piece. So what did you do personally to help you get back on track? Because I think it's so important that people understand, okay, I get it. I hear your story. I can relate, or I can relate to parts of it. But tell me, what was the one or two things you did to invest in yourself? And if you've got questions out there, fire them off in the chat box. I want to get those answered. But what did you do? What were the one or two things that you did to say, this is what I have to do for me to get me back to healthy?
Right. So that's a great question, because there were, quite a few different things that we did. And we had to take the approach of there wasn't going to be like a magic pill, a prescription drug that was going to fix everything. We had to approach it from the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual standpoint. And not to say you take a whole picture and fix it all at once, one step leads to another, but we had to have that open mentality that every area needs to be, attacked in a good way. Interestingly enough, and I'll just say this because the book that Joe's talking about, ironically, during that time I had invested in myself and was getting some talk therapy. And we'd had so many just insane moments that we equate to God, putting this in our life. But I'd heard about this amazing book and like, oh man, Joe, I forgot what it's, called, and wrote it down. And I forgot the next week to ask. And all of a sudden he ends up in this little, small little bookstore in Washington, and it was the same book. I'm like, no way, you've got to be kidding me. So we had a lot of great moments like that, where a lot of things started to intertwine and flow together, which helped us to not only learn about ourselves, but together, and to be a support in a way you never thought possible. So the talk therapy was a big thing for me, but also nutritionally, so the diet, but also the supplements. I really found that out of every area that I was struggling, when I was getting lost in here, that was impacting everything so much more substantially. So because of what had happened, especially with Joe and some of the stuff that he had taken, I experienced something similar myself previously. And we decided to take a whole different approach with that. So we actually got into using some natural products that really work on the gut-brain axis. Has made a substantial difference in our lives. And I actually am contracted with the company now, where I just love it. I help people with it. So does Joe, but we take it on a daily basis. And so we really had to look at a bunch of different areas of educating ourselves. So getting books, reaching out to others, experts that we knew that we could trust, that wouldn't lead us down a bad path again, take us in the wrong direction. Building our tribe, also being a support to each other, because at the end of the day, even if we had frustrations with each other, we really understood each other better than anybody else in that circumstance. And so once we could, like Joe said, get out of the way that we were communicating before and start changing that, we actually became an immense support to kind of unlock stuff from not just this circumstance, but from before. And it's really ironic, because through this period of time, it's like, if we wouldn't have gone through this, would we have unraveled all the layers from before that were already impacting us that we weren't addressing? And so it became just an amazing path forward, where each day we just had to, no matter what was going on, take a step. And when you look at those failures, guilt, shame, whatever, we thought failures are not steps backwards. They're not something to be ashamed of. We're not going to fail backwards. We're going to fail forward. We're going to take it as an opportunity.
I want to jump in here, because there's some questions in you. This is so amazing, because I think people need to hear this piece of it. You guys go through the pain of a divorce. You guys start to work on your own stuff. You start to invest in you, whether it's through good eating habits. I don't know how many times I think our moms told us that when we were kids, right? Like, you are what you eat. I remember that. Like, I had this colonel that used to tell me, like, if you eat the bread, you'll look like the bread, right? But which is true. But you guys, how did you guys go through all of that and become friends? Like, I mean, we all hear the war stories. Like, about the exes, you guys went through it and you're friends. How did that happen?
Biggest thing is forgiveness. I mean, if you look at all of this, every person has gone through a series of trials, traumas, struggles, successes. It's a series of them. I don't know them. I only see what I see today. And I can judge that person based on what I see today, or I can realize it's a series of things. The interaction with Sandra, I do know her in a way that most people don't, because I know the sequence in the series. I can relate to it too. I understand the struggle. I understand how it impacted me, and I have empathy for that. And though, at times I was hurt and sometimes I hurt, it's one of those things where forgiveness is key. It's understanding that, what I'm seeing today is from something that's, well, as I call it, my shadow. What people see from me is my shadow, and I have one. I'm guilty of that shadow, and I'm hoping that people, when I'm struggling, will understand that this isn't the way I want to be. This isn't the way that I want to act. This isn't the way that I want to express myself. I want to be a person who loves, who hugs, who gives courageously. But at times I don't. And having that understanding, having that forgiveness, just realizing that, at that moment, I didn't show my best, please forgive me. I have to also be able to do that.
But there's a level of maturity in that, Joe, that I think some people miss, right? I mean, it's easy to say, forgive,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a level of maturity in that. And I think there's a couple things that I want people to take away from this conversation is that you guys made a decision, right? You didn't allow somebody else to make that decision for you. You purposely made a decision that says, you know what, I've got to invest in me. This is what I need to do to get me healthy, right? You surrounded yourself with a tribe, which I think is so important, especially in this time where, pandemic and some people feeling isolated, that, whether it's phone calls, text messages, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever, that people make that interaction. Eating healthy, I think critical, right? Putting the right stuff in your body, because what you put in affects how we think, right? I mean, we all know this. You drink way too much alcohol and oh my gosh, different personalities come out, right? So there's things that we have to guard against. And so tell me one or two things that if you were sitting down with somebody and you said, hey, listen, we made it through this. We hit rock bottom, but that became our foundation for growth. Right? Which I think is so important, that people sometimes look at rock bottom and they go, look at everything I lost, as opposed to look at what I didn't lose and what I have to gain. Mm-hmm. Right? Different perspectives. So you hit rock bottom, that becomes your new foundation to grow. What are the one or two things that you would say, hey, if you could do this on a daily basis, do this one or two things? Sandra, what would you say that is?
I would say, well, kind of attached to what Joe was saying earlier, when you have forgiveness for other people, I think one of the hardest steps is forgiving yourself. And part of investing in yourself is forgiving yourself, because when we, hurt other people, or we go through circumstances where we impact them, we also have that second leg of it where we're dealing with ourselves. And so I really would say invest in yourself, which kind of equates to start loving yourself. Exactly where you're at. It may not where you want to be right now, but it's okay. You're here for a reason. What can you learn from it? How can you start moving forward and really start setting goals for where do you want to be? That living on purpose, like you were talking about, Mike. So investing in yourself, forgiving yourself, loving yourself, but then really putting your foot down, whatever starting point it is. Like I said, we jump over the edge of the cliff, we landed, we had to have a starting point. Find a place to start so that you can get to that point of living on purpose, and really journal that journey too. I was never a journal. I was never a lock and key girl as a kid writing in my journal and stuff. But I found that to be so profound, because I can go and reflect on what I did good, what I felt I did good, maybe what I made progress on, what I didn't, what I want to change. And it is just amazing, because it gives you a sense of peace when you forget a lot of things in your mind. It's kind of like written in disappearing ink when you're just thinking about it. So if you can reflect on it, then you can remember it down the road and be like, wow, I've really come a long way. What's my next chapter going to look like? What's my next step? But really putting that effort in.
I love that. Joe, what about you?
For me, first thing is because of my faith. I've got to trust God. You know, and I'll be honest though, and I'm just really realizing, because I have a lot of anger towards God. And so turning to him every day is my first step. And I don't do it the best at times. And so I'm going to be honest with that. But then the second thing is, and to echo what Sandra said, I don't forgive myself. I really, to this day, I haven't. There is a myriad of things that I have gone through, I've done as an Apache pilot, as a dad, as a husband, as a man, that I know, and I don't like myself for it. I'm so angry, but I'm working on that. I work every day to forgive myself, because my shadow is my shadow, but my shadow doesn't define me. And from that, I also, and learning to accept myself for who I am, I'm starting to move forward, and I'm starting to this new journey. And it has been an unbelievable one. And it's where curiosity was really kicked in. I'm an artist. You can see my paintings. You can see my photography. You can see, I love to play the guitar. My passion is marketing. I love.
You're self-taught in that guitar, right? I mean, you're self-taught in the guitar, and you're self-taught in your artistry and your photography. And if people have not seen what you do as an artist, and what painting and photography, they've got to check your stuff out, Joe, because you bring humanness into your photography. It's amazing. I just got to say, I mean, Sandra, I'm sure you'd agree with me.
Last few years have produced a lot of amazing stuff.
Yeah,
it really has.
It's so amazing. And I'll give people an opportunity to find, you both, so that they can connect with you. And Joe, I think the healing part is so important. And there was a question that said, how do you know when somebody has PTSD, and, what can you do for them essentially? That's a hard one, right? I mean, that really is, like, everybody has something traumatic in their life. And PTS, I think for some is just, and people need to understand this, it's just not caused by combat. I mean, the number one cause oftentimes is car accidents, of which
I was diagnosed myself with it, and I never knew. So,
right. So, I mean, there's so many different things. And so there's just things that we begin to shy away from that become triggers. Yep. And, we just got to let people know that it's okay. It's safe. Right. I mean,
yeah. And to really go into that question, and just to take a second, it's hard, but the way I've noticed it, and the way that I've really become aware of it, is I look at how people interact. If a circumstance happens, there are healthier ways. Through DBT, I learned a lot of healthy coping skills, and a lot of people don't know that. They apply their own, drinking, or avoiding the issue. Blaming is one that I've seen a lot of, is where people aren't able to self-reflect. And you see hostility, you see anger, you see these things that when you're an outsider, an objective person, you're like, oh my gosh, why is that person doing that? There must be something wrong. And when you're the person who's doing it, you have this, like, I know it's wrong, I'm reacting. Why can't I not just have a normal, healthy conversation? Why aren't we able to just deal that? Or why can't I process my pain? Why do I have to run from it and avoid it and go to a bottle, go to some type of distraction? In the military, the bottle is the distraction.
Yeah, you're talking about secondary emotions, and I think that's so right. We talk about anger, guilt, shame, secondary emotions when we're not dealing with the root cause. What is the root cause? And there was a question here that I think is so great. The question was, how did faith and how does faith help you along your journey? And Sandra, what would you say to that?
Oh man, faith has been such an evolving, beautiful thing. I know for myself, I know, Joe, it's okay to say the same for you. You've spoken to it a lot, but it has really just evolved in something so beautiful where, as Joe said previously, he's angry at times. We are. We just have to remember that for us, like, especially in terms of faith in Christ, that we are loved exactly where we're at, and we have every opportunity to move forward. And to really feel that inside can impact how you treat others, and how you move forward. And it's something that actually completely changed my life, because my first master's is in biblical studies. I mean, my faith became so important to me that moving forward with that, something of which Joe was there for the entire time, supported me through that. And so we learned a lot. We started to really get to know Christ on a different level, and we needed that. We felt like maybe it was more surface praying at times where, you know, we just felt we were down, but really getting into it where it's almost like sometimes every day was like a constant prayer rather than thinking to myself. And, you know, if I was frustrated with something, turn it into a conversation with God. And I'm sure sometimes driving down the road, I looked crazy, but, you know, it was just that continuous engagement. But it was just absolutely beautiful to just see it unfold, but really keeping with it and praying daily. One thing that we started to do that started to shift a lot for us is we prayed together. Even if at times we were frustrated and things were difficult, we would pray together. So it doesn't, you know, it's great to pray with your spouse, but even finding somebody else that you can pray with, that you can talk to, that you can trust. And I would like to say this too, really quick, just touching back on the PTSD, because it took forever for me to find out that I was dealing with anxiety. I had no idea, or that I had PTSD. It took me finding the right person. I had to start to learn I love to meet people. I love to network, things like that. But I had to start to be very careful with the people that I was bringing into my inner network that were going to guide me through that, help me to figure out what's going on with anxiety and stuff. And so if, you know, anybody's looking to find out, like, how do you know if you have this? It may take some time to find the right people to be in your tribe that can help you kind of go through that discovery phase. So I just wanted to touch on that.
I think it's so good. I think there's a couple things here. Number one, I want people to understand that therapy is good. Okay. I mean, I'm just going to say it, that like therapy is good. Like I joke about it, but I joke about it from stage too, where I tell people like, you know, the reason I have the success I do today is because I've got an amazing therapist. And that person, holy smokes, man, he has earned his wings in heaven, no question. So therapy is good because it gives you an outlet, right? There's another thing that you said, Sandra, that's so important is be careful who you surround yourself with, because our tribe matters, because they feed us, right? They feed into us and we begin to take what they say. Another thing I think that's really important for people to take away from this conversation is if you're going to invest in yourself, you got to be careful with the labels that you put on yourself. Man, I'm a failure. Man, I have guilt. Man, I have shame. Man, I have all this, right? These labels begin to really influence how we think, right? I mean, and Joe, you speak to that as we all struggle with it and people are struggling with it. I have anxiety, right? If you think about the words we speak, we begin to strengthen the word. We begin to strengthen that image in our head when we speak those words, right? And I'll just share with you guys one of the things that I'm big in my faith, but it took me for years to figure out that I had to start my day with thank you. 2 words. When I wake up, my eyes open, I have just gotten into the habit of just saying thank you, right? Because that triggers something in my brain to suddenly say, gosh, you know what? Okay, thank you. Okay, God, what am I thankful for this day? And does that mean I have amazing days every day? No, just like you guys. But it does begin to strengthen in our mind a different attitude, right? I mean, it's so crazy what's going on in this world today. You know, we talk about PTSD and people think, and Joe, you and I talked about this, disability ratings. I'm 100% disabled. You keep saying that, you're going to believe it long enough, right? If you say that I'm an essential worker and I'm a non-essential worker, guess what? You're going to start believing that. And I want people to understand that your story is so powerful because you guys somewhat grew up together. You created this bond. Things didn't work out. You fell rock bottom. You invested in yourself. You got back on top. We're having this conversation today, which is so amazing. You guys work so well together, and you guys have developed this level of maturity that is, I think, so so hopeful. I'm just going to say it's hopeful for others that if you're going through crap, and excuse me, I know this is a kid-friendly show, but if you're going through a boatload of whatever, okay, that circumstance doesn't have to define you.
Right.
Right. It does.
Yeah, your life forward, it doesn't have to.
I want to be careful with the time because I know we're coming up on the time. And Joe, you have become a great artist in many ways. And so why don't you share with people how they can find you, and then I know you guys are big on tribe. So I want you guys to talk about where people can gather to get a tribe and to start to develop a relationship. So Joe, where can people find you and your artwork and check you out?
Yeah, really, I've got two places. One's on Viewbug. Just name is Joe Wankelman. It has probably the largest collection of art that I've done there. And it's kind of a photographer site. And then the other one would be Instagram, which is Curious_Joe's Adventures. And so that's really where I'm only published right now, just because of my artwork. They're actually internal explorations taken through pictures. My homeless portfolio was when I was searching for myself, trying to find that I mattered. My protest pictures and portfolios when I was angry at the world and I couldn't handle, and it was right after I attempted. The homeless was right before, protest is right after, and then my landscape is there. But yeah, it's that. And as far as the tribe goes, it's about accepting people for who they are. We're all different. We can throw stones at people, but really, I mean, who gives me the right to throw stones at other people when I'm the one who's got so much baggage and a shadow that I can't handle? And so for me, it's about finding that everybody has gifts, everybody has talents, everybody is important and amazing in their own way. Some I can communicate well with, some I struggle to communicate with, but at the same time, that doesn't take value away from them. And so if I can just love them and realize that I can learn from them, it creates unique conversations, and I'm genuine with it. I want to know, I want to learn, because I want to grow myself. And that has really increased my tribe. It's brought people that are broken around me, but we're all healing together with this understanding we can do it, with the hope that we can move forward, with the idea, with the purpose that we are going to become a better version of ourselves tomorrow than we are today.
Yeah, I love that. Sandra, what about you? I mean, you've got such an amazing story, and we've only touched the surface of this, but you speak about, tribe and relationship, and it's so important. And where do you turn to for tribe? And if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do it?
So to get in touch with me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Facebook, I did initially have Sandra Wankel when I was changing things back, but it was Sandra Wankelman, and that confused a lot of people. So Sandra Wankelman for both LinkedIn and Facebook. I do have an Instagram. It's hope_through_health. And what I do there is that actually speaks a lot to the stuff that we take naturally. So people are really interested in that for boosting mental health, all over body function. They can take a look there. Get a hold of me on any one of those channels, and I promise I'll get back to you. In terms of actually my tribe is really just my family and my friends. My daughter, obviously, she's number one in my tribe, and but I have different tribes that are very close. Some of them kind of interconnect. So my family, my friends, also building different networks. I mean, what we do, this is a tribe, and I'm really looking forward to building this tribe forward with the Live on Purpose mission, and being able to go to the site to check out the webinars and really help expand this tribe moving forward with all of us that are really just in the same storm, but not the same boat, right? That's right. Way to say it. Yeah, I know, because I got confused because I heard it opposite. I think I said it right, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, everybody's got their own storm, right? But this is the first time, I think, in the world, at least since I've been alive. I mean, we had 9/11, but this is global in many ways, and the storm is global, and yet people are in different boats. Some are doing okay, some are doing amazingly well, and others are like flat out like, I don't even know where I'm going to get bread and butter tomorrow. And I think it's so important that we exercise to be kind through this, and that's what I love about you guys. You guys have a kind spirit about you, even though that, Joe, you were one of the world's elite, and there was things that you did that are probably things that you don't even want to talk about. And Sandra, the experience that you went through and coming out on that, very hard, very difficult. And it's so easy for people to look at people that are in the headlines and say, man, their life is so easy. But we've all got a story, and we're all dealing with some sort of storm. And I just encourage people, if you have questions, to reach out. We're posting all this stuff on the vision2020today.com. You can see the previous, interviews that we've done. We're going to be doing more of these. And I think it's important for the audience to know that these two have come alongside the Vision 2020 effort and initiative. And we're going to do this for years. We're going to bring hope to people. And we're not only just going to bring hope, but we're going to bring an ability for people to truly prepare mentally, to plan their life, and to execute smartly through it. And so if you visit Operation Military Family, you can get involved in the tribe. You can see the past interviews. We'll do Facebook stuff. Joe and Sandra, I want to thank you both. I know we went long on this one, but it was so important that people hear your story, because people are going through it, and people can relate.
And Mike, thank you too so much, because honestly, for us to be able to come together really for the first time to do this, especially at the stage we're at, we're still living and learning and growing every single day, you know? So we're still in that process, but to have you be the person that we talked to today and really open up to, you're amazing at what you do. We obviously have nothing but love and respect for everything that you do, and especially how you conduct these webinars. You just make people feel so comfortable. It's easygoing, and I really appreciate being able to have this platform as our first together to be able to open up and share.
Well, I'm truly honored by that. I totally want to evolve into the guy that, you remember on Jerry Maguire, where people would get on a show and say, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but Joe, and thank you. And for those that join live, thank you guys for being a part of this. This is so amazing. You guys can go back and revisit this and listen to this topic again and write down your questions and dig in, like figure out ways that you can invest in yourself, whether it's eating better, whether it's getting up in the morning and saying thank you, finding ways to be grateful. Joe and Sandra, thanks for being a part of this. Appreciate you guys. And for those of you who join live, thank you for being a part of it live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for everybody for joining today.